We open to a summary of the pilot episode in which an alien kidnapper dragged them 70,000 light years away, then carked it, but not before mentioning his mate was out there somewhere, so it looks like we're continuing that story today. We open, again, to Kez receiving some brain training from Tuvok. We're working on sharpening those psychic shenanigans of hers. She manages to focus enough to hear the thoughts of Neelix, but the connection is broken when she laughs. Emotions get in the way, Tuvok says, and the lesson concludes. She's off to sickbay now, where the doc is a bit arsey about her being late. Then they're interrupted by a weird whining noise, and no, it's not Neelix. We track it down to the rock that the caretaker from the pilot turned into when he carked it. It squeaks and vibrates some more, then shuts up. Everyone comes to have a poke, and the doc tells them that it was exhibiting life signs while it was squealing, but he wasn't able to get a proper check on it before it stopped. B'Elanna says it's dead now, but Janeway thinks there's something more going on. Tuvok agrees and says we should stick it behind a force field, which is fair enough. We don't get the chance though because it starts screaming and vibrating again. B'Elanna's scan shows life signs, but not from the rock. Instead, it's reflecting life signs from somewhere else. Kim scans for life forms like the caretaker and finds a faint reading for one, so given the chance it might be able to send us home, we're going to try and track it. I guess we're not going to consider how a life form will react to aliens turning up on its doorstep, carrying the corpse of its husband. B'Elanna rigs the caretaker's corpse to act like a compass to the applause of Janeway, which seems a little odd given that she and Chakotay were the ones against desecrating remains in that episode where Kim pissed on a whole religion, but we'll let it go. Then Tuvok reminds us that the caretaker was a powerful lad and that being at the mercy of his mate might not be ideal, so we get to making some poison. After a bit more squeaky vibratey, we're able to get a heading for the life signs and away we go. When we get to the signal origin, we find an array very similar to the one we kaboomed back in the pilot. Scans say this one's inhabited by a Compa. They don't seem like they want to chat though and start pooping yellow balls at Voyager, which, given what happened to the last array, is a reasonable response. The main Ocampa lad gives them a call and tells them to fuck off, then hangs up. We're not going to do that though because we have an ambassador, Kez. She says hi instead and we get slightly further than fuck off. He's still suspicious, but is willing to meet. The meeting doesn't go according to plan, with the Compa guy explaining that Voyager doesn't quite have the pristine Starfleet reputation they were aiming for, what with the caretaker death and the Kazon War and the resources they've taken. Chakotay says these things aren't true, which is, open to interpretation, shall we say. Getting nowhere, Kez and a Compa guy have a chat on their own. She says they're trustworthy because they saved her life, which is, again, not strictly true because Neelix sprung that little trick on them without warning, but we'll let it go. A Compa guy wants to know more about Kez and how she lives, so let's go on a tour. In hydroponics, a Compa guy compliments Kez on her work, then laments that she isn't surrounded by more life, before being condescending about how little she knows. Then he says that she's naive and needs teaching, and that their caretaker, Suspiria, will teach her how to become strong and master her psychic shenanigans. To prove this, he accelerates the growth of all her plants. After he leaves, Kez is talking to Janeway. Kez is delighted at finding someone who embodies the mental abilities she always believed a Compa could control. Janeway suggests she might want to be cautious, but Kez says it's fine because she has a good feeling about him and, based on Kez's impeccable taste in men, I'm sure he's entirely above board. Right on cue, we switch to a shot of a Compa guy psychically chatting with Suspiria, who tells them that he can have the girl as long as he delivers the ship. Later, we're all having dinner with the Compa guy. He says all their questions about Suspiria will be answered by her at the meeting place, then invites Kez to stay with them permanently, with the sort of reaction from Neelix you might expect. When we're done, we nip down to engineering to talk about that poison we're making, for pacifism. It's okay though, because it'll only paralyze. Probably. We've never actually tested it, and the only real data we have on the species is from a crusty corpse, but sure, let's get ready to inject random shit into another life form anyway. In the mess hall, Kez is getting some telekinesis pointers from a Compa guy, with Neelix sniffing around too. She moves a cup, then Neelix tries to interject and is told to shut the fuck up. A Compa guy teaches her how to reach into atoms and agitate them, warming up a cold liquid, and the tea drinker in me becomes inordinately jealous. A Compa guy buggers off, Neelix congratulates her after being a bit pissy, then they discuss her potentially staying with the other Ocampa. I'd hate to lose Kez, but it does mean Neelix would stay with her, so, silver lining and all. Voyager arrives at the place where Suspiria talks to the Ocampa, and a Compa guy sends her a signal to let her know. I guess he can't do brain chatting from here despite apparently being closer. He says she'll be along at some point, probably. While we wait, let's do some brain training with Tuvok and see how his lessons compare with the compa guy. She does the hot tea trick, which impresses Tuvok, but he urges a little caution. To prove his point, Kez is struggling to keep control and kabooms the cup. It's not stopping and she asks Tuvok for help. Unfortunately, he's a little busy having his face cooked by her brain. The doc fixes him up after explaining that Kez had essentially microwaved his blood, and Tuvok says this proves the lessons should continue as she needs greater control of her new skills. Suitably chastened and swearing to herself that she'll never let anything like this happen again, she goes to hydroponics, where a camper guy teaches her how to murder everything in the room and absorb its life like a vampire, so that's fine. Later, the caretaker's corpse is doing that squealy thing again, probably meaning Suspiria is near. Then some tentacles arrive and we lose contact with engineering, but I'm sure it's a coincidence. As this is going on, a compa guy is trying to convince Kez that she belongs with them and that she can reach out and talk to them with her mind. You know, like those other well-known philanthropists, the Borg. Hell, they even have a queen in Suspiria. Speaking of which, she's down in engineering, dressed as a little girl and cuddling a dead rock while crying, and I bloody told you this would happen. Kez figures this out by reading Suspiria's very, very killy thoughts, just as Suspiria starts trying to do a murder on Janeway. Oh, and the rest of the ship, it seems. A compa guy is still trying to convince Kez that she's better than these people, and, while he has a point, she's not buying it. Even less so when he throws Neelix across the room with his brain. She goes all scanners on him and starts trying to cook his head, which seems to have a sympathetic effect on Suspiria, distracting her from the murdering. Janeway's released and she grabs the poison gun before pooping some purple into Suspiria, while Tuvok sticks a force field round her. Janeway repeats that they didn't kill the caretaker and, to prove their honesty, shuts down the force field, presumably trusting in the logic skills of a recently bereaved god to keep them safe. Suspiria takes the hint, turns into a tentacle hentai monster, and scarpers. Oh, and she grabs a compa guy too. After things have calmed down, Kez is having another psychic shenanigans lesson with Tuvok. It seems the hot tea trick isn't an option anymore without the presence of a compa guy and the connection to the others, but she prefers it this way as she didn't like the aspect of herself that took pleasure from that power. Tuvok delivers this week's moral, which is that only through acknowledging a weakness can we hope to combat it, and we fly away. End of episode.